Good morning, dear students. Let's begin our social science class. It's my third video of history, and today we are going to discuss a new topic for this unit towards civil disobedience. Now, students, in our previous class, we studied about the two different cases or actually the three different cases that how the movement of Swaraj spread in the town, then in countryside, and then at various other places also, and what was the meaning of Swaraj for different type of people. Now today let's read civil disobedience movement. In February 1922, Mahatma Gandhi decided to withdraw the non-cooperation movement. He felt the movement was turning violent into many places and satyagrahis needed to be properly trained before they would be ready for mass struggles. Within the Congress, some leaders were now tired of mass struggles and wanted to participate in elections to win provisional councils that had been set up by Government of India. That was a fact of 1919. So they were not showing no interest now in the mass struggles. They felt that it was important to oppose British policies with the councils, argue for reform, and also demonstrate that these councils were not really democratic. C.R. Das and Motilal Nehru formed Swaraj Party within the Congress to argue for a return to council politics, but young leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose pressed for more radical mass agitation and for full independence. In such a situation of internal debate and dissension, two factors again shaped Indian politics towards the late 1920s. Now, what were the two factors that shaped Indian politics? The first was the effect of worldwide economic depression, and it was that agricultural practices began to fall from 1926 and collapsed after 1930 as the demand for agricultural goods fell and exports declined. Peasants found it difficult to sell their harvest and pay their revenue, and then by 1930 the countryside was in turmoil. So this was the first major reason. Against this background, the new Tory government in Britain constituted a statutory commission under Sir John Simon. Now this is very important question. We are now going to discuss about Simon Commission. Set up and raised to nationalist movement, the commission was to look into the functioning of constitutional system in India and suggest some changes that should be brought in those constitutional system of India. This was only the Simon Commission. The problem was that the commission did not have a single Indian member and they were all British. So as India wants complete freedom from the Britishers, now how can they accept such a commission which constituted only of British people? When the Simon Commission arrived in India in 1928, it was greeted with the slogan "Go Back Simon." Now this was a very popular slogan in the 1928 year, because as all of them were Britishers, and the commission was also not very sure because these all Britishers were one and the same. Hence the slogans like "Go Back Simon" were popular. All parties including the Congress and Muslim League participated in the demonstrations in an effort to win them over. The Viceroy Lord Irwin announced in October 1929 a vague offer of dominion status for India in an unspecified future and a roundtable conference to discuss a future constitution. So after that, in order, because "Go Back Simon," this slogan was very popular and Muslim League along with some Hindu participated in these demonstrations. That's why Lord Irwin, who was actually Viceroy, he announced in October 1929 that was of dominion status. This week he offered, and in India it has its unspecified future. Therefore, a round table conference should be organized so that we should discuss the future constitution. This did not satisfy the Congress leaders. Now, this was not accepted by Congress leaders. The radicals within the Congress, led by Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose, became more assertive. The liberals and moderates, who were proposing a constitutional system within the framework of British dominion, gradually lost their influence. Now, in December 1929, under the presidency of Jawaharlal Nehru, the Lahore Congress formalized the demand of Purna Swaraj. That time, the Lahore Congress session was formed, which demanded Purna Swaraj or full independence for India. It was declared that 26 January 1930 would be celebrated as independence. Actually, that was the constitution framing day. But afterwards that we saw that India got its complete freedom not in 1930 but in 1945. or in 1947, that was of 15 August 1947, would be celebrated as Independence Day when the people were to take a pledge to struggle for the complete independence. But the celebration attracted very little attention, so Mahatma Gandhi had to find a way to relate this abstract idea of freedom to more concrete issues of everyday life. Now, because people were facing some everyday life issues and they wanted a complete freedom in those issues by the British government, so Mahatma Gandhi needed to find those issues and had a debate on that. Now, let's discuss the first topic which is discussed in the chapter towards civil disobedience movement, the Salt March and the civil disobedience movement. Now, it started with the Salt March. Mahatma Gandhi found in salt a powerful symbol that could unite the nation. On 31st of January of 1930, he sent a letter to Viceroy Irwin stating 11 demands. Now, I already told you, Lord Irwin was Viceroy and Mahatma Gandhi sent him some 11 demands. Now, he found salt as a powerful symbol. Some of these were of general interest, others were specific demands of different classes from industrialists to peasants. The idea was to make the demands wide ranging so that all the classes within the Indian society could identify with them and everyone could be brought together in a united campaign. The most stirring of all was the demand to abolish the salt tax. The salt tax, which was imposed on the people of common India, that was to be abolished, and it was the major motive of Mahatma Gandhi. Salt was something consumed by rich and poor alike, and it was one of the most essential items of food. The tax on the salt, and government monopoly over its production, Mahatma Gandhi declared, revealed the most oppressive face of British rule. Now, it was the most oppression that the food that they eat require salt every day, and Britishers imposed the tax on that major basic thing of life also. Mahatma Gandhi's letter was, in a way, an ultimatum. If the demands were not fulfilled by 11 March, the letter stated the Congress would launch a civil disobedience campaign. Irwin was unwilling to negotiate. Now, he did not want it to negotiate or to discuss about it. So Mahatma Gandhi started his famous Salt March accompanied by 78 of his trusted volunteers. The march was over 240 miles from Gandhiji's ashram in Sabarmati to Gujarati coastal town of Dandi. The volunteers walked for 24 days, about 10 miles a day. The thousands of came to hear Mahatma Gandhi wherever he stopped. His speech delivered a feeling of patriotism in many people, and he told them what he meant by Swaraj and urged them to peacefully defy the British. On 6 April, he reached Dandi and ceremonially violated the law manufacturing the salt by boiling sea water. So Salt March was all about when Gandhiji reached Dandi, and there the sea water he took in a bowl, he boiled it and he obtained soil from that bowl. That was a major outbreak of Salt March. That was the major aim of Salt March, that the salt tax which was imposed on the common people should be relieved. Otherwise, this is another way by which common people would obtain the salt. This marked the beginning of civil disobedience movement. How was this movement different from non-cooperation movement? People were now asked not only to refuse the cooperation with the British as they had done in 1921 to 1922, but also to break the colonial laws. Thousands in different parts of country broke the salt law, manufactured salt, demonstrated in front of government salt factories. As the movement spread, foreign cloth was boycotted, liquor shops were picketed, peasants refused to pay revenue and chowkidari taxes, village officials resigned, and in many places, forest people violated the forest laws also. Now, the beginning of the Salt March was that to remove tax which was paid or which was imposed on the common day basic need, that is salt. Along with this, people took an advantage and they broke various other laws as that has been discussed here, going into reserve forest to collect wood and graze cattle also. Worried by the developments, the colonial government began arresting the Congress leaders one by one. Now, whoever were the Congress leaders, like Jawaharlal Nehru, Motilal Nehru, the British colonial government started arresting them. This led to violent clashes in many places. When Abdul Ghaffar Khan, a devout disciple of Mahatma Gandhi, was arrested in April 1930, angry crowd demonstrated in the streets of Peshawar, facing armored cars and police firing. So that was such a disastrous moment at that time when Abdul Ghaffar Khan was arrested. That time, all the crowd has demonstrated, and even British officers were not less. They were also armored along with police firing. Many were killed. A month later, when Mahatma Gandhi himself was arrested, industrial workers in Sholapur attacked police posts, municipal buildings, law courts, railway stations, all structures that symbolize British rule, because they wanted an act of defiance and they wanted complete freedom from British. A frightened government responded with the policy of brutal repression, means all were brutally beaten. Peaceful satyagrahi were attacked, women and children were beaten, and about 100,000 people were arrested. That was a main conclusion of the Salt March, as well as arresting of some of the leaders. In such a situation, Mahatma Gandhi once again decided to call off the movement and entered into a pact with Irvin on 5 March 1931. Now, what was the pact? By this Gandhi Irvin Pact, Gandhiji consented to participate in a round table conference. The Congress had boycotted first round table conference in London and the government agreed to release the political prisoners. But now, as we see over here, now Gandhiji agreed to join in the round table conference and in turn government released the political prisoner. In December 1931, Gandhiji went to London for conference. But the negotiations broke down and he returned disappointed. Back in India, he discovered that government had begun a new cycle of repression. Now, as the time he went to London for the Round Table Conference, from where he returned disappointed, when he came back, he saw a new cycle of repression by British government. Ghaffar Khan, Jawaharlal Nehru were both in jail. Congress had been declared illegal and a series of measures had been imposed to prevent the meeting, demonstration and boycotts. With the great apprehension, Mahatma Gandhi relaunched the civil disobedience movement. For over a year, the movement continued, but in 1934, it lost its momentum. And that was the main drawback of civil disobedience movement. Also, it was actually an act of British government so that when Mahatma Gandhi is not here, they can apply such laws which were harsh to people. Now, how participants saw the movement? Let us now look at different social groups that participated in civil disobedience movement. Why did they join the movement? What was their ideas? What did Swaraj mean to them? Now see students, in the countryside we see first case, rich peasant communities like Patidars of Gujarat and Jats of Uttar Pradesh were active in the movement. Being producers of commercial crops, they were very hard hit by the trade depression and falling prices. As the cash income disappeared, they found it impossible to pay the government's revenue demand. And the refusal of government to reduce the revenue demand led to widespread movement because they wanted those taxes to be reduced, but revenues to be reduced, but the government refused it, and these rich peasants became enthusiastic supporters of civil disobedience movement. Now we saw students that many of the people did not like civil disobedience movement and they resigned from this movement. But now as soon as we see in countryside and various other places, because of the common problems which are faced by these people, they again joined back to civil disobedience movement. The first we saw is the common and the rich peasants that were like Patidar in Gujarat. Now these, as we saw over here, that a revenue was imposed by the government which they were denying to remove, and that's why they joined the civil disobedience movement, organizing their communities and at times forcing reluctant members to participate in the boycott programs. For them, the fight for Swaraj was a struggle against high revenues, but they were deeply disappointed when the movement was called off in 1931 without the revenue rates being revised. So, when the movement was restarted in 1932, many of them refused to participate as they had a hope to reduce the revenue. But as soon as Mahatma Gandhi called off for the movement, that time now the people did not like to participate. The poor peasantry were not just interested in the lowering of revenue demand. Many of them were small tenants cultivating land they had rented from landlords. As the depression continued and the cash incomes dwindled, the small tenants found it difficult to pay their rent. They wanted the unpaid rent to landlord to be remitted. They joined a variety of radical movements, often led by socialists and communists, apprehensive of raising issues that might upset the rich peasants and landlords. The Congress was unwilling to support no rent campaign in most places, so the relation between the poor peasant and the Congress remained uncertain. Now, poor peasants, in addition to lowering of the revenue rate demand because of the depression, they wanted the cash that they had given for as a revenue. They wanted this cash back. But now Congress session was not allowing such things that are done by poor peasants. So that's why the relation between poor peasants as well as the Congress session was not that good. What about business class? Now it is in another case. How did they relate to civil disobedience movement? During the First World War, Indian merchants and industrialists had made huge profits and become powerful. Keen on expanding their business, they now reacted against the colonial policies that restricted business activities. They wanted protection against imports on foreign goods and a rupee sterling foreign exchange ratio that would discourage imports. To organize business interests, they formed the Indian Industrial and Commercial Congress in 1920 and the Federation of the Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries, that is FICCI or FICCI, in 1927. These were the major organizations formed by these business groups. Led by prominent industrialists like Purushottam Das Thakur Das and G.D. Birla, the industrialists attacked colonial control over the Indian economy. They supported the civil disobedience movement when it was first launched. They gave financial assistance and refused to buy or sell imported goods. Most businessmen came to see Swaraj as a time when all the colonial restrictions on the business would no longer exist and trade and industry would flourish without constraints. Now you can see over here, students, Swaraj meant different for these business people. It meant that there would be no restriction on the trade that were done by these businessmen, and it was no exchange of goods that were imported. But after the failure of the Round Table Conference, business groups were no longer uniformly enthusiastic, and they were apprehensive of the spread of militant activities and worried about the prolonged disruption of business as well as for growing influence of the socialism amongst the younger members of the Congress. Now the industrial working classes did not participate in the civil disobedience movement in large numbers, except in Nagpur region. Now there the industrial people participated. As the industrialists came closer to Congress, workers stayed aloof. But in spite of that, some workers did not participate in civil disobedience movement, selectively adopting some of the ideas of the Gandhian program like boycott of foreign good as part of their own movements against the low wages and poor working conditions. There were strikes by railway workers in 1930 and dock workers in 1932, and in 1930 thousands of workers in Chota Nagpur tin mines wore Gandhi caps and participated in the protest rallies and boycott campaigns. But the Congress was reluctant to include worker demand as a part of its program of struggle, and it felt that this would alienate industrialists and divide the anti-imperial forces also. Now see, students, another important feature of civil disobedience movement was a large-scale participation of women. During Gandhiji's Salt March, thousands of women came out of their homes to listen to him. They participated in the protest march, manufactured salt and picketed foreign cloth and liquor shops. Many went to jail. And in urban areas, these women were from high caste families. In rural areas, they came from rich peasant households. So overall, we can see that in the movements, the women also participated. Moved by Gandhiji's call, they began to see service to nation as a sacred duty of women. They wanted to do it as it was their sacred duty. Yet, this increase the public role did not necessarily mean any radical change in the way the position of women was visualized. Means how the woman was treated inferior in the society, the no change had came till now. Even though they participated in these movements, Gandhiji was convinced that it was a duty of women to look after home and hearth, be good mothers and be good wives. Now this was the thinking of Gandhiji about women, and for a long time the Congress was reluctant to allow women to hold any position of authority within the organization. It was keen on their symbolic presence. Now you can see this is an important again 3-mark question of women condition in the India during the civil disobedience movement. Now, what were the limitations of the civil disobedience movement is an important 5-mark question in the board examination. Not all social groups were moved by abstract concept of Swaraj. One such group was nation's untouchables. Now you can see this is a very important case of untouchable who from around 1930 had begun to call themselves Dalit or oppressed because of the behavior that was done to them by other Indian people. For long, the Congress had ignored the Dalits for fear of offending the Santanis, the conservative high caste Hindu, but Mahatma Gandhi declared that Swaraj would not come for 100 years if untouchability was not eliminated. He wanted a unification, complete unification. He called untouchables as Harijan or the children of God, organized satyagraha to secure them entry into the temples and had access to public well, tank, road and school. And he himself cleaned toilets to dignify the work of a bhangi, that is a sweeper, and persuaded upper caste to change their heart and give up the sin of untouchability. Now he wanted upper caste to not look Dalits as untouchable people, rather to look at them as Harijan or the children of God. But many Dalit leaders were keen on a different political solution to the problem of community. They began organizing themselves, demanding reserved seats in the educational institutions. Now see students, they wanted educational institution seats reserved for them and a separate electorate that would choose Dalit members for legislative council. Political empowerment, they believed, would resolve the problem of their social disabilities. Dalit participation in civil disobedience movement was therefore limited, particularly in Maharashtra and Nagpur region where the organization was quite strong. So there Dalits did not participate much. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, this is another important case and is a very important. Now, how did he improve the condition of Dalit? Who organized Dalit into Depressed Classes Association in 1930, clashed with Mahatma Gandhi at the Second Roundtable Conference by demanding separate electorate for Dalits. As he himself was Dalit, he wanted that the conditions to be improved by Dalit as he has also faced in his childhood. When the British government conceded Ambedkar's demand, Gandhiji began a fast unto death. Now you can see over here, students, British government allowed Ambedkar demand and it considered the Ambedkar's demand that was to form a separate electorate. Now Gandhiji came to know the tips and the tricks of British government. The British government actually wanted the Dalits to not be with the Indian people because as Indian people were denying their rights, so Britishers already said I'll allow them their rights, and this was a way for Britishers to increase their army. But Mahatma Gandhi saw it and then he conducted a fast unto death, means he would conduct a fast till he died. He believed that separate electorate for Dalits would slow down the process of their integration into society. Ambedkar ultimately accepted Gandhiji's position as a result for a Pune Pact of September 1932, and it gave depressed class later to be known as scheduled caste reserved seats in provincial and central legislative council, but they were to be voted in by a general electorate. And the Dalit movement, however, continued to be apprehensive of Congress-led national movement. Some of the Muslim political organizations, the another case in India, were also lukewarm in the response of the civil disobedience movement. After decline of non-cooperation Khilafat movement, a large section of Muslims felt alienated from the Congress because their demands were not fulfilled. From mid-1920, the Congress came to be more visibly associated with openly Hindu religion nationalists like Hindu Mahasabha. As relations between Hindu and Muslim worsened over the time, each community organized releases, processions, and with the militant fervor, provoking Hindu-Muslim communal clashes and riots in various cities. Every riot deepened the distance between the two communities. Now you can see, along with when at the one side we all were facing Britisher oppression and they wanted complete freedom, on the other side was the Hindu-Muslim clash that was the deepening of relationship between the communities. The Congress and the Muslim League made effort to renegotiate an alliance, and in 1987 it appeared that such an unity could be forged. The important difference were over the question of representation in the future assembly that were to be elected. Now Muhammad Ali Jinnah, one of the leader of Muslim League, now it is very important one mark question, was willing to give up the demand for separate electorate if Muslims were assured reserved seats in Central Assembly and representation in the proportion to population in Muslim dominated provinces that were of Bengal and Punjab. Then the negotiation over the question of representation continued, but all hope of resolving the issue at all the parties' conference in 1928 disappeared when M.R. Jaikar, now it is also another important one mark question, of Hindu Mahasabha strongly opposed the efforts at compromise. When civil disobedience movement started, there was thus an atmosphere of suspicion and distrust between the communities. Alienated from Congress, large section of Muslims could not respond to call for an united struggle, so they were unable to unite properly with the Hindu community. Many Muslim leaders and intellectuals expressed their common concern about the status of Muslim as a minority within the India. They feared that the culture and identity of minorities would be submerged under the domination of Hindu majority. That's why they did not want it to be united with the Hindu people, as Hindu were in major. So they thought that their demands will be dominated soon by the Hindu, as they were in majority. That's all for the day, students. Thank you and have a nice day.